Welcome to the Healers Café, conversations on health and healing with Manon Bolliger, a retired and deregistered naturopathic physician with 30 plus years of experience. Here you will discover engaging and informative conversations between experienced healers, covering all aspects of healing, the personal journey, the journey of the practitioner, and the amazing possibilities for our own body and spirit.
So welcome to the Healers Café. And today I have with me Alexa Rae. And she is known online as the Authenticity Healer, and a woman who decided to shake up the healing game in mental health. So I'm going to leave everything else about your bio to you, and I just want to welcome you to this discussion, this conversation about health. And I think I'd like to start, though, by asking you what got you interested in healing and health and all of that to start with.
Yeah, thank you for having me on. I appreciate it. I'm really excited to hop on here. I just love talking about all things healing. So I'm honored to be here. And so yeah, my name is Alexa Rae. My pronouns are she and her. And I came up with this term of authenticity healer, authenticity coach, whatever you want to call it. Because I feel like most people, and my target audience is women. So most women for me really struggle to truly understand who they are authentically. And that could be a numerous of factors that are impacting that. Right. And so my background, essentially, I come from a very complex trauma childhood. And then I in my adulthood, I was a mental health nurse for years. Then I went into being a clinician and working in the traditional therapy modality world. And I, number one, felt like there are so many gaps in the healthcare system. I truly, from my own experience, both my own healing and working in the system, I felt that there was a lot of gaps that were preventing people from genuinely evolving past their trauma, sort of keeping them in this state of being in a survival mode. Because I mean, at the end of the day, I could go on this for days, but the healthcare system thrives off of people being sick. And so I struggled working in an area where I really I felt like I had this higher power of needing to help women heal. And I felt really stuck after, like 15 years working in the field, because I just didn't have the flexibility to actually help people evolve and have life-lasting changes in their life. So long story short, I quit my career, the toxicity that comes with healthcare, all that stuff, and hopped on board my own healing practice to help women really make changes in their life to actually live a life where they feel connected to their authenticity, where they feel like I can show up as I am, as an individual, proudly and unapologetically. So that's sort of the long stint of that.
Okay. Well, I think we should definitely break it down a little bit too.
Yeah.
We understand the evolution of you in that sense. So what is it in the first milieu you were in for like 15 years that you felt didn't allow you as a woman to be authentic? Let's start maybe by that.
Sure. So I definitely come from the lens of mental health, of course. And so for me, in the mental health world, within the healthcare system, there's the diagnostical manual, the DSM-5, it's at 5 now, but that really dictates people's illnesses in regards to mental health. And number one, that book was written by a bunch of white men up in an office who probably have never experienced mental illness themselves. And so that really started to become prominent to me in my experience when working in there. And I also really found that if the modality, the therapy modality, or the system was not working for the person, that the healthcare system was essentially blaming that person. Oh, you're just too unwell. You're just too crazy, quote unquote, for this to actually work. And they never would take responsibility or accountability for what they did wrong. So that really did not sit well with me as an individual.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. That I resonate with totally.
Like,
I actually wrote a book, What Patients Don't Say If Doctors Don't Ask, but
mm,
it's really the ingrained errors of the medical approach that labels people. That's the diagnostics, uh, more based on the drugs available that they kind of, you know, peddle basically,
yeah.
rather than getting to the core of what is affecting this human being on
Oh,
all levels, right? So I totally see the limitation of that. But
oh.
but you as a woman in that milieu, being your authentic self, is that, did you try, or did the rest of it come later, like where you realized that you were squashed or you couldn't, or
Mm.
what was going on?
I think for me, like in my career, I don't want to discredit everything that I experienced. I think I learned a lot. Obviously, I started in forensic psychiatry, meaning that I work with people who had criminal offenses and a mental illness at the same time. And so being a woman in that setting, from my own life experience as a woman, having a lot of sexual trauma, a really intense childhood of instability, emotional instability, that was like almost like a trauma bond that I had with my career as a woman.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I spent years in that setting, and then I transitioned out, and then I eventually ended up in leadership. And this is when my eyes opened up. This
Mm.
is when I was like, I am in leadership. I should be at the forefront of changing. I was in a clinical education position trying to bring forefront of the issues that we should be facing. And yet I was just stomped on over and over and over again. No, we can't disclose that information. We can't take responsibility for that. It was just really intense for me. And I'm a woman who really values authenticity, obviously, but being able to be who you are as a person in your workplace, especially in healthcare, especially in mental health. And that was just not allowed at all. And so it really made me uncomfortable, seriously.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because, there's definitely at least two ways of looking at, um, what our role as we become aware of what's going on. You can either fight within the system, or decide to create something parallel, and
Mhm.
and come from the positive. This is what we believe, and this is what really should be, rather than fight with these archaic,
Mhm.
medico-industrial complex, finance to the hilt, with special interest groups that back each other, and where doctors end up just being drug peddlers,
Yeah.
without meaning to be, right, just
Mhm.
not knowing anything else. And if you look at the evolution since the Flexner report, like there are no other choices, apparently.
Yeah.
So it's very hard to create, and I think that's, when I hear the word authenticity, I hear the word creation,
Yeah.
the ability to create something. Okay, so let's go on with your story. I want to hear.
I do want to say one thing, and I had a patient years ago. This is when I was in forensics, and they said to me, living with it, I tell this people all the time, it's truly powerful for me. Living with a mental illness is like living in the bottom of a very deep, dark sea, and you're always trying to find your way to the surface. And this person said, I wish that the healthcare system was the type of system where they would jump out of a boat, swim to the bottom of the sea, grab your hand, and guide you up to the surface. But he said, unfortunately, it's not that way. They sit in the boat. They feed you lures like medication to superficially bring you to the surface. So you have no idea how you got there. It won't last forever, because once you let go of that, you will go back down to the bottom. And it's a true representation of the healthcare system, like you're saying, is the medication at the forefront, especially mental illness. It's like, I talked to someone who are like, oh, I'm on 7 or 8 medications for anxiety. I said, have you ever actually addressed the root of it or anything? No, they've never addressed that with me. And I'm like, that is not okay. I just want to say all that. I think it's a rant, but I do want to say that's a really important piece to listen to.
No, I agree, and I think, rant or not, it's really a truth that when you are authentic and you're real and you're actually dealing with real people, this is the major complaint, when they realize that they're still victims, and it's very hard when you're dependent on a system to find your empowerment.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right? It's like, yeah, I'm looking at your swimming analogy or the boat, and it's like, you kind of know you're hooked there, but if you let go of this, you're just going to go back down.
Yeah.
Because, you haven't really been shown another way. But is it like, so how do people shift, do you think? Like, I think we all,
I don't know. I don't know the answer. Like, I have been asking myself that question, and so to use some backstory to my story is that I was in leadership. I was in the clinical education department, and I was frustrated. It was coupled with me becoming extremely unwell, overload. I was reactivated in my trauma, and I was working in a mental health field, not being supported by my employer on something that they should be supporting me. Like, even an example would be like, there's $500 for you to put towards your mental health, like psychologist, whatever. That doesn't do anything, and so that's just a prime example. But anyway, so it took me getting very unwell to being essentially forced to take time off and be in my own healing journey for people to say, like, this isn't a healthy place to work at. And I know, like, for time and time before that, I met with mentors at work, like, how do we fix this? And it was really comes down to leadership at the top. And I think that the people who are at the top of leaderships of corporations, which unfortunately is what healthcare is the type of personalities that are up there are not the personalities that are conducive to comprehending what it means to be real, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I don't. Yeah, it's really not in their ethos.
No,
it isn't necessary. I think that, it's just like the idea that the body can heal, right? Or that we have innate capacities, right? Right now, you would not even know that having an immune system was possibly helpful.
Yeah.
They're going about it. It's like, so it's really not about relationships with others or relationship with yourself. It's almost like it's a relationship to a system that has a program.
Yeah.
You lose yourself.
Sorry if you can hear my dogs, I apologize. 1 sec. I'm so sorry. Yeah, I think that's what happened to me, is that I literally lost myself in the system. Like, I was like, okay, I have to betray myself I have to change who I am if I want to make it in this world. That's what it really came down to for me. And the deeper I got into that, the more unwell I became. And the more I was like, I was really like shaming myself. I'm the problem here. I'm the one that is at fault here. And then it took a lot of space away from that place and a lot of people saying it's not you for me to actually get that.
Right. So let's take you to the present now. How is it that you are helping people? What is it that you're offering? What do you do? What happened?
Yeah, sure. So I call myself an authenticity healer, and I've sort of it's been about 1.5 years I've been in this role of being an entrepreneur, which is a roller coaster itself. And I really have resonated with the fact that I call myself a self-love guru as well as a trauma coach. And so those things I truly believe are what are in alignment with someone missing authenticity. And so because I have so many certifications and different things, but I truly don't think that one size fits all. And so I take modalities and evidence-based modalities, and I couple those with things that you really can't use in the healthcare system. Let's say crystals, or let's say, somatic experiencing in the body, and using different modalities and coupling them for exactly what that person needs. Because I think the healthcare system is very cookie cutter. And so for me, I want it to be customized. I want to help women meet them where they are. And the big thing that I truly do is I help women become their own self-healer and give them the capacity to recreate the story of who they think they are on this earth, because we've all had these stories of who we were told to be, whether that was modeling, whether that was trauma, whatever shifted you into the person you are. If you're living with learned patterns that aren't serving you, so many people think that that's the way it is. I'm stuck, I take medication for anxiety, and that's just, what I have to do. But there's a totally different world out there that I have used my own life to have me my own self-healer, to really see, like, I can change and be whoever I want on this planet. It just takes a bit of work to get there, especially in the society that we live in today,
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. So let's see. I had so many questions for you to break it up. Well, actually, one of the transitions, I think it would be interesting. It's unrelated to what you do specifically, but often when we want to get a message out, like now that I'm deregistered, I need to change the way that I can help people. And take off my doctor hat. And I realized too that most of the time I was really more the type of physician that would educate and empower. And, really, if you stick with that, you're good to go. You just can't prescribe. And
it's true.
And you, Manon Bolliger here, and I want to thank you for taking actionable steps towards engaging your healing journey and helping others discover their path by watching, sharing, subscribing, and reviewing these podcasts. Every review and share helps spread the word, these different perspectives and choices and options for healing. And to thank you, I'd like to invite you to sign up to my free 7-sequence email tips on health and healing for everyday life. You can go to healerscafe.com tips. Thanks so much. And you also can do some of the lab tests that I might want to do, or, you have to refer, but that, one refers. It's not the end of the world. But one of the hardest things is the entrepreneurship piece, is realizing, is getting all that together. And I thought maybe how does that work for you with authenticity? Because for me, I feel like there's sort of mixed messages, or that I'm giving myself about this, which is, all stuff that is probably unconscious, and that one can deal with. Even in the therapy I do, I could probably resolve it. But how are you looking at all this? You have to go out in the world and say what you do, and how is that for you?
And I think for me, it evolves more and more the more I sit into this role, in my opinion. I think that I've always really been a person that sort of is outside of the box. I've always been a person that's a bit different, you would say, than other people. And so I think even before I was in this role, I was, present on, let's say, social media. That's a big part of my job as an entrepreneur, is to like present myself in a way that empowers women to show up as themselves, and I think it is really hard because it's an extremely vulnerable thing to do, is to show up as myself in all of the context that comes with putting yourself out there. But I think that the more I get comfortable with the role that I'm in, the more that I lean into the ability for me to show up as I am. And, I don't show all my personal life, but I'm pretty candid in what I show, because I truly believe, like, if I'm going to be out there and saying to women, be yourself, be authentic, be real, and I'm not going to do that, I don't think that's authentic at all. And I know there's so many people out there portraying themselves as someone who is truly authentic, but it's not actually. An example would be like on my Instagram, I will share non-highlight reel aspects of my life. I struggle with fertility. I'm having a bad day, really showing people that just because I'm on the side of being a healer does not mean I'm better than you. It does not mean that I am up here and you're down here. I think that's so old school. We are all human beings. And I think that's the big part of why women are drawn to me, is that I am a real person,
Mhm. But because this thing, I just had this discussion, actually, it's funny, about days ago. But it's like, well, just be yourself on social media. And I'm like, I'm not really a social media person. I don't,
Yeah.
I don't even, like, what do I say? It's not
Yeah.
like I'm afraid to hide anything. It's just, come join me today. I'm doing podcasts, or I'm doing whatever, you know. Yes, I laugh first thing in the morning, and you hang out with me, but it's like, really, that's not who I am. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, if you showed up, no problem. I'd let
Yeah.
you in the door, but I'm not. And they always say, oh, it makes you vulnerable, but it's like, I feel like it makes me false, because I'm not worried about my vulnerability. It's like, hey,
Right.
often it's through that you find things about yourself. I mean, I have no problem being vulnerable, but this is, yeah, I'm really struggling with this whole part. So,
Yeah. Social media it is an odd place. I totally agree. And I'm not the best at it either. I'm very introverted. And I also think to myself, how do people just come on to social media and they're just so funny all the time? And that's not me, but I think it's a matter of like, finding, I truly believe that any entrepreneur has a place, and the people that are supposed to connect with that person will meet them. That's my opinion.
one way or
One way or another. Like, social media isn't the end all be all. It's just, sadly, if you're an entrepreneur, that's sort of like part of the game,
It is part of the game, and that's what the part that I find, the most challenging. It's funny. It's not
Mhm.
the actual art of what I do, or the authenticity of me, or any of that. It's the communication of that piece. If you're
Yeah.
more like an introvert. So anyway, I was curious when you were talking about authenticity and the fact that you're really just starting this whole venture, how that is for you. And I think for many people in health, it's an issue.
Mhm.
They're not used to they're used to the conversation, which is actually why I started a podcast. Because
That's smart. Yeah.
you can have a conversation. but but just talking to a camera and telling them blah blah blah, I feel like, it doesn't matter how great I feel the transformations I offer are, I can't say it in a way that just too weird. It's like, wow, it just come to me. You're just like, oh. Maybe, I don't know, maybe.
Yeah. No, I feel you.
Yeah, anyway, because
Yeah,
I do
I
think,
feel you that.
yeah, there might be another way that still is around the corner to get this out. But okay, well, let's go back to the content. Well, these are conversations about health, healing, and how we get out there, right? Because it doesn't
Yeah,
matter what your skill set, if nobody knows about you, you're not really doing your mission, and what you really are here to share, right? Because
exactly.
so
Yeah,
it is important. That's why I emphasize that point, because some people are just fabulous at it. And it's you know but
I
that's
know. And I think,
their authentic self. That's how they feel, I guess, right?
yeah. And I think, for me, I guess, like, I mean, I've kind of like a Jane of all trades, as you'd say. I've done a lot. Like, I used to be professional dancer, like when I was younger. Like, I've always had sort of an expressive side to me, whether or not I'm an introvert, which I am, but like I have the ability to express myself. So I see other people who are going on the same journey as me, and they have a more challenging time showing up on social media because it's very uncomfortable to try and say something to a camera, like you said. So I think that the more that you just do it, right, the easier it
Right.
becomes, like anything, really.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah. So
Um,
why don't we talk a little now more about the work you actually do? And
sure.
I think the aspect I'd like to know more about is, how do you see that people switch from victimhood, which is
Mm.
sort of what the, I don't call it healthcare, the disease management society basically needs. It needs people who receive but are not really ready to make major changes, right? So how do you see that transformation, or what have you noticed, the people that come for you, what's their
Mm.
trigger to going, "Mm, we have to do this differently"?
Yeah, that's a good question. I have noticed a trend where most people are coming to me um, because they are frustrated with the, as you call it, disease management. So you said
Yeah.
healthcare system. Yeah. So they are frustrated with the traditional system because most of them will say, I've been in therapy for 10 years and I'm still having all of these symptomology of trauma. And then I'll say, oh, well, what do what kind of things do you talk about or do in therapy? And they're like, oh, we just sort of talk about how my week's been. And did anything bother me? And I'm like, okay, that's fair. I said, fine, to be able to have a vent session, but really they're coming because they're like, I want to actually get past this victim mode and actually own my life, to actually be able to show up in my life. And clearly that's not what they're getting in the healthcare system. Now, this is not to diss all therapists at all. There are some incredible ones out there. So I don't want to come across like I'm, bashing them all, but there are a lot of them that are just sort of keeping people in this modality. And I think partially it's because there is limitations in what they can do. And also I think a lot of people haven't done the work themselves. So they fully can't grasp what it's like to be on the other side. So I find the trend is that, yeah, women are coming to me because they are extremely frustrated with the system, and they just are like at a point where they're willing to invest in themselves because they've been let down. They've been hurt by someone in the healthcare system. They've been let down. They've been betrayed, right? There's some really intense things that come up for women when they come to me, like, oh, well, my therapist lied to me, or my therapist, we're working on attachment theory, and then they just break up with me. It's like things like this. And I'm just like, really unethical things, in my opinion.
Well,
Um, yeah. So I think, yeah, they come to me. And I guess when you're saying like get them out of that victim state to the system, really is to help them see that there is actually a different way, right? For
mhm.
myself, building credibility in what I do is a big part, right? Because I think as a society, we've really been trained to only see the benefits in, you know, traditional ways, that there's no other way, and that's just like floofy, or it's not going to work, or how do you trust people? That's a big one too, especially an entrepreneur where you're finding people you're meeting people on the internet. How do you trust people? But I think for them is like really convincing them like, hey, there is a different way. And I think for me that is definitely conveyed in really connecting with women, as well as sending them. I do weekly. I have an exclusive Facebook group with like 4,000 people in it or something. And I do weekly videos or bi-weekly videos on different topics so they can understand, oh, there is something else out there. Because I think there's just a lot of lack of information outside of the biomedical, model.
Mhm. Yeah, no, I agree. I was thinking, it was struck me as you're speaking how it's like the paradigm that we both got raised in, or gone through. It's very much a problem solution, or as if we have to spend more time analyzing the problem,
Mm,
to find a solution, and the solution by nature would be limited to whatever paradigm, slight changes. Like let's say if I was, as a naturopath, dealing with um, mental illness, I'd definitely be looking also at the impact of diet, because
right.
there's 70% of the neurotransmitters are made in the gut. So sometimes changing the diet could change completely the mood of a person, right? But that's one possibility. There's many other possibilities, but to shift the client or the patient into the driver's seat is really, to me, that's how you get creative. And that's, what is it you're wanting to see for your life? Because I see behind you, she designed a life she loved. And the word designed is you became the creator of the life you loved. And I think for me, seeing the victim, it's really transitioning into realizing that we are creative beings.
Yeah, I think there's so much power in creativity, 100%. And I think that's true. I think that, I truly believe that people can design or create a life that they want. And that, from my perspective and my experience of working with women, is the people that I work with is, looking at the learned behaviors, really making connections between where you are today. And let's say you had childhood trauma, where that connection is there, really learning new patterns, as well as really being able to do that mind-body connection. Like, I think there's education that has to be done. There's reflection that needs to be done inside of you. And as well as there needs to be really awareness around what is my body, what are the sensations, my feelings, my thoughts, and even, nutrition, all of these things. How are these all connected? And how can I use all of that to my own power to create a life that I want? And I think there are people who would disagree with me on that, of course. And I think that there are people who will never go on a healing journey, because healing is hard. It's not a one checkbox that you check off. It's a continuous thing. And then there are people who are willing to go on the journey. And I think those are the people that will be more divine in their complexity as a person, but also understand what it truly means to be authentic more than others that won't.
Yeah. I mean, you can't help everybody. It's true.
No,
right?
you can't.
And so, if you're going to choose people that you can be effective for, like we kind of end up defining it by what we attract, by what we
absolutely
believe. Yeah. Well, it was a total pleasure having this conversation with you, Alexa. And do you have any last few words you want to share, or how people could get hold of you? I mean, they're going to have your bio and access to you, but anything else you'd like to share just to wrap up?
I think, I just want every woman or every person listening to this just to remember that you deserve to have a life that you love. Like, you're worthy of that, and that you all have what's inside of you to actually create that. And that's the biggest message I want anyone to hear in this world. And you can catch me on Instagram, Facebook, Alexa Rae Schiefer. I'm even on TikTok, which is like a baby. And I have a podcast too, Authentically You, which I would love for you to pop on there and join me as well sometime. It was a pleasure meeting you and chatting with you today.
Well, thank you very much. And we'll see you another time then.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you for joining us at the Healers Café with Manon Bolliger. Continue your healing journey by visiting thehealerscafe.com and her website, and discover how to listen to your body and reboot for optimal health.